Right, so for the record, this is the excellent Tom Kucharz of Ecologistas and Acción in Spain.
So Spain, we could say, is a perfect example for what we have heard in the previous explication, because we have a highly dependency of 78% of coming resources from the external world. So that means depending on the volatility of the international energy prices, especially in relation to financial speculation. You have also a rise of energy consumption, and this is especially crucial for environmental issues, of 50% between 1994 and 2007, which is the double of energy consumption increase than in the rest of the EU. You have in Spain a 100% completely private market, which is in the production, in the distribution, so completely private. You have a monopoly of 5 energy utilities. I will not give the names, but if you want, we can deepen this issue later. We have politicians, both ministers or ex-presidents who goes into the energy companies all the way around. High officials of these energy companies going into the government. You have huge subsidies to the fossil fuel and mega projects. These subsidies are, of course, highly more relevant than to the renewable sector. You have the elimination of public support for renewable energies quite recently in relation to, they say, in relation to the austerity measures, but the crisis and the austerity measures were just a perfect excuse to stop the decentralization of the electricity sector. You have an oligopoly, both on price building and of the whole energy prices, which creates a huge increase of the energy prices in the last years. You have more than 470% of stock market price increase between 1994 and 2007. And this is very important because through that stock market price increase of the values, the energy companies had a lot of new money and liquid money to invest and to cooperativize the whole electricity market. And just to give you a comparison between this huge increase of the stock market values in the same time between 1994 and 2007, the salaries of the people, so the cross-cutting salaries, only increased 1.9%. And just also to make clear, all what we are talking about here has a huge gender imbalances, especially if we're talking about salaries. In Spain, women perceive an amount of 30% less salaries than men, and working 20% more than men. If we look to the structural tendency of regressive redistribution, of course, with the economic crisis, and especially with the tendencies of the social cuts in the last years, we had a reduction of salaries, especially between 2007 and 2011, by 3.2%. So this is a very unequal distribution of income and richness. And on the other hand, you have a high profitability and competitiveness of the private energy companies, which I should also mention, it was especially in the moment of social democratic governments when those companies were privatized. So this is maybe different to other EU countries, but Spain in that sense is far away to the requirements of the Troika to privatize the energy sector in other countries. In these 5 years of crisis, we had 3 million loss of jobs. So the unemployment rate is 26%. And what is more important, when you look into the unequal distribution of income, you have a 50% of population, both the people who receive salaries and those who are unemployed, which is 388 euros a month. Yeah? Of course, all these figures are cross-cutting. But with the high amount of energy prices increasing, you can imagine how many families starting to have a lot of problems to get to the end of the month. And with data from 2010, we don't have new data about it, but you have about 12% of households who have many difficulties to reach to the end of the month, and 7.4% of the households who cannot pay the principal costs of the house, so which include the house, but also the energy costs and others. And 40% cannot afford extra spending. So that means every year's increase of energy prices, this will affect a large number of population. What is also important to mention is that we have 2.8 million unemployed people who don't receive any of state subsidies. So no unemployment subsidies, nothing. Just 2.8 million people. And between 2007 and 2011, we had 500,000 evictions of people who cannot pay their rents or the credits they had for their banks. This is also very important because housing evictions is today a very of the most urgent social problems. But also then the whole statistics in relation of who is really affected by energy poverty is getting really unexact because many people are just changing so quickly the situation of housing, getting back to the parents, getting back to their grandparents, whole families going to live with the 350 minimum pensions of the grandparents. So this kind of social decomposition has changed in the last 3 years very quickly. So all the overall statistics are getting really unexactly. So what we have today is an amount of 10% of population who suffers energy poverty, which would mean 4.4 million people. But I insist, this is not only data from 2010, but also this is very unexact in terms of to go really into details of what is suffering, especially those who are being evicted by the banks from their houses. And this is also directly linked to the EU policies, to the austerity measures, because the major efforts of the Spanish government was to rescue the banks and to give all the financial help to the financial system, and not to rescue the people or to have transitional proportions, which was perfectly manageable in terms of buying all the households and creating public housing stocks, which would be perfectly possible in the situation of decreasing housing prices and, of course, a lot of money who went directly to bank rescue, what we never see again, this money. So in the moment of these 5 years of crisis, we have 1 million more people in risk to get poor. This is up to 21% of population. And what is also very important, one of the austerity measures imposed by the EU was the increase of the indirect payment of the VAT. Yeah? So this went up very highly, and this affects, of course, also the percentage in your energy bills who went up very important. Another austerity measure was to freeze the pensions. So a whole millions of pensioners who every year had an increase in relation to the price inflation, so also the price inflation of energy market, stopped getting this increase of the inflations and, of course, getting poor to pay the bills. What more important is for us, we should look to is the more vulnerable groups. For example, the migrants. Migrants have much more unexact statistics where they are living and how they are living. So we have a much more complicated situation now because one of the austerity measures was to change the sanitary law, so the public health system. So you had more than 800,000 people who stopped to be part of the general health system. So all the statistics you have been presented in the before presentation in relation to winter health problems and so on and so forth. So now we will lose a lot of statistics because the migrants just don't go to the public health systems because they don't have the access to it with the public card because of this new law, or they fear to go to there to be expelled by the government. And the risk to enter in poverty in the migrant population is by 49%, so nearly 50%. So this is doubled in relation to the rest of the Spanish population. And then you have also 4 million people, we call it functional diversity. So we don't call them disabled people, we call it functional diversity. And this is 4 million people in Spain, yeah? But only 28% of them had access to labor. So there is a huge social cuts also in the help of those people with functional diversity. And of course, those is another big group who will be affected by energy poverty. Then we have also the Sinti Roma minority, completely social excluded, and in many times they're even not accessing schools and the normal housing situations. And for them, there is even no statistics how much they are suffering, for example, energy poverty in the places they are living. Okay, then I would like just to mention some of the more actions or mobilization parts we could be planning. So overall, it would be civil disobedience as one of the tools. For example, in South Africa and in some of the Latin American countries, like in Colombia, we have learned that communities organize themselves, sometimes with trade unions and sometimes not, to reconnect people to the electricity grid when they are cut off because they cannot pay their bill. There are many of the experiences. Some of them they are written, some of them they are not so written, but there is a huge necessity and urgency that those platforms fighting for a new energy model or those fighting against privatization put in their agenda the direct help, so civil disobedience, to reconnect people to the grid. Another one would be that we create a whole of range of actions to mobilize around social exclusions and energy poverty. So in the Spanish platform for a new energy model, there's a proposal to be discussed in the next few months to do actions on local level with candles and to show that many people during the winter is the only energy access they have is like symbolic, the candle. This is, of course, not so true because they have other ways to connect, but it's just to symbolize and to make visible the situation of poverty and social exclusion many people will be. Another kind of campaign which is right now going on by the platform by the people affected by the eviction from housing is to create obra social, which is like, you know, many banks, especially public banks, they created corporate social responsibility to many years to social wash their bad activities. Well, the movement created a kind of counter-argument to say, okay, all the houses which left empty because of the economic and financial crisis and because of the housing bubble, we will occupy them and we will provide basic right, which is housing, to the people. Well, this is the way also we have to deal with electricity, seen as a human right and to provide with collective actions to reorganize the right of access to it. So these can be some of the questions. We also are dealing a lot of giving a kind of new complete concept to the whole energy issues with the platform for a new energy model, which is quite interesting. And civil disobedience actions should be one on the top of the actions we have to develop. Last thing I would like to underline is, even if we talk about energy poverty in Spain, we are talking about an overconsumption as a whole society. So one of the first things we defend together, and of course this is very conflictive with especially trade unions, is that we have to reduce. Our proposal is, from our organizations, 42% of primary energy to reduce the consumption from here to 2020. This is not only in relation to climate justice goals. This is also especially related to our ecological debt towards those communities who are affected by the natural resource extractions. So we are receiving 26% from natural gas from Nigeria, more than 20% of oil from Nigeria, and everybody here knows very well the ecological, social, and criminal dimension of oil and gas exploitation in Nigeria. So that is why, of course, we will tackle and fight against energy poverty, but as overall objectives for changing the energy model in Spain, one of our first political demands always is the reduction of energy consumption. And with this, you could also argue very importantly the class aspect of our struggle. So the energy struggle is a class struggle, because you have, as I said, 50% of population who even do not earn the minimum income, 388 euros per month, and you have 150,000 people in Spain who earn, which is like 0.8% of the population, who earns more than 120,000 euros a month. So this kind of inequality also in energy consumption must be overcome. And then finally, of course, you have a huge energy consumption in the industry, which is completely subsidized, which is also a complete unfair distribution of the energy bill. We have in the energy bill since 30 years financed huge mega projects, both of coal and nuclear, which made them so monopoly today. And the last thing I wanted to mention is in these energy struggles today in Spain, you have a lot of composition of new actors. So in the platform for a new energy model, you have small enterprises, you have energy cooperatives, you have environmental movement, trade unionists, you have people working more on social exclusion and poverty issues, from a more regional, from a local perspective. So it is also very important for us to rethink a little bit our social political struggle around energy, to give them new creativity and new forms to bring actors together. This is also the way to struggle on the poverty issue, also from an environmental issue, and to invite those fighting poverty issues and social exclusions to also enter to think about the more environmental aspects.
Thank you very much, Tom.